Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the North Central Region Water Network's current webinar series. My name is Lois Wolfson, and I'll be substituting today for Rebecca Power, who usually moderates these webinars but couldn't be with us today. The current webinar series is a university extension-led collaboration among the 12 land-grant universities in the North Central region. And today we have two speakers who will be sharing the stage as they talk about the next generation extension. If you have questions, we encourage you to submit them at any time during the presentation by opening up the collaborative panel. It's in purple. It's the purple tab in the lower right-hand portion of your screen. After the presentation, we'll have a dedicated question and answer session to address the questions posed. Today, our presenters are Deb Weitzenkamp at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and also Alan Pilkenton from Michigan State University. Since they'll be presenting together, I'll introduce both of them right now. Deb is an extension educator at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Kimmel Education and Research Center, and Deb works to prepare youth for careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. These are the STEM disciplines. And as you can see, she has a URL where you can find out more information about her and her position. Alan Pilkenton is an educational media coordinator with Michigan State University Extension and the Children and Youth Institute, and is charged with enhancing this program reach through the efficient use of technology. Alan has over 20 years of experience as a K-12 educator and 7 years of experience in instructional design, faculty training, and computer support and program development. So with that, I'll now turn over the program to Deb and to Alan.
Well, welcome everyone. This is Deb, and Alan's on the line too. But I wanted to tell you as well that Next Generation Extension started at the University of Nebraska in one region of the state and quickly spread across our state. We have a small team, but mighty, and those include Dave Varner, Alice Henneman, Laura Thompson, and Austin Deerfeld. Several years ago, about 4 years ago maybe, I was at K-State and did a presentation around Next Generation Extension, and Alan was in attendance, and so that's where I met Alan. So Alan has been a presenter with Next Gen and has participated in the blog and some webinars as well. So really thankful that Alan could join us today and co-present. So Next Generation Extension really come out of this long conversation about how can we really help our faculty within Extension prepare themselves for what's coming next, what's coming down the pike. And I love this quote from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, because when Alice and the cat are talking about which way to go, the cat is pretty much saying, well, you'll get there if you spend enough time walking, but it probably is better if you know which direction you want to go or what your goal is. Same thing holds true in Extension. We've got a lot of different goals, but if we don't have a plan of what direction we want to go, then it's kind of hard to focus our efforts. I love this quote from Abraham Lincoln that says, the best way to predict your future is to create it. And since we don't really have a crystal ball about what our future is, or any superhuman capabilities, at least yet, we can learn that what other great leaders have taught us. And Abraham Lincoln, this quote about saying the best way to predict your future is to create it, I think that's totally awesome. Because if you think about it, we have the power to create exactly which direction we want to go if we just put our minds to it. There are things that get invented along the way that are disruptors in that plan, but there are also things that are invented along the way that can also help facilitate us. So we have the power to create whatever we put our minds to, and that means we hold the future in our hands. Our future, the future of extension. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we have pretty clear vision. In Nebraska, we want extension available to anyone at any time, any place, any path, and any pace. We want our clientele to be able to choose the delivery system within which they learn the best and that works to help them achieve their goals. In other words, we want to have a real impact. We want to be relevant and we want to make a difference. So now what, right? How can we actually reach this guy? How can we reach out to people who we can impact most with our programs? And I was telling Alan that this guy probably is really representative of my thought process too. When I have questions, I want to be able to figure out the answers to those questions. I don't really want to wait around for a webinar or wait around for a class, a face-to-face class to be taught someplace that maybe isn't the most conducive environment. It might be conducive, it might be very education oriented, but it's not where I like to learn. I think our learners and our clientele are changing a little bit, and we definitely need to be reaching out to these new audiences. So who are some of these new audiences? Well, we have rural small business owners who want to reach their clientele in Japan. And we have active learners who want to learn anywhere but in the classroom. We have local foods growers who want to create a food bank for the elderly. The old soul who will one day farm and then later become Secretary of State. Or perhaps even a retired banker who now is raising his grandchildren and needs help. In Extension, we hear these personal stories every time we speak with new clientele. And we know that that Extension is a collection of these stories, individual stories. And it's our goal to reach out to these individuals and help them. Really, our goal is to help them make an impact in their world. So we have some tools here. This is actually Brian Solis has created this conversation conversation wheel prism, and what it does is it identifies some of the tools that are currently available out there. Once we have identified our audiences and our objectives, we know that there are a wealth of these communication tools out there that can help us reach our target audiences. And many of them, admittedly, are probably better and perhaps even more efficient than our current tools. But also, when we're talking about professional development within the organization, the plethora of communication tools can be absolutely overwhelming to us. And let's face it, there are new tools coming along every day. So how do we go about choosing the right tool for the job when we can't even keep up with what is coming at us, right? Well, those of you that are as old as I am, maybe, remember the old Beatles song, I get by with a little help from my friends. In Extension, the next generation extension effort is really based upon this whole concept. Okay, Alan, your turn.
All right, so thanks, Deb. So we all know Stephen Covey, and we know he's kind of the king of staying focused and doing the first thing first. And so he came up with this term, that we can learn best when we teach others or when we teach somebody else. So how could we apply a little help from our friends and teach each other tips to weed through today's communications and teachings and our overload of tools and all the things that happen in our day-to-day lives? Well, in education, you could call this building a professional learning network. So this is what I learned from Deb when she mentioned that we were at K-State and I was in one of her presentations, and so she talked a little bit about professional learning networks. And you can also think of people and tools in the same network, and you might call it a professional learning environment or something like that. So Next Generation Extension was created to do that, to kind of help people create a personal learning network. So one of the things that I've gotten out of it is that Deb has invited me to be part of the blog and in the network, and we have become kind of a personal learning network together with some other people that we've met along the way. So next generation extension is about helping extension faculty kind of develop that professional learning network. So it's they can get a little help from their friends by learning from other extension educators across the country, or maybe within their own environment, and they can be with people who have implemented strategies for reaching new audiences, strategies to improve engagement in extension programming, and set strategies for assessing the impact of our extension work. So as I said, the Next Generation Extension kind of blog in the network was created to so faculty could create their professional learning network and become the superhero that they always wanted to be, and make a real difference in the people around them. So we know that every superhero has a support network, whether that's one person like Superman has Lois Lane and Batman has Robin, or maybe a whole group of people like the Avengers, who everyone is good at a few things. And individual members might be called on to just bring out their expertise. So in extension, we call upon our professional learning network when we need that expertise. So this Next Generation Extension is kind of that tool, so you can kind of bring people together and get the expert advice or things out of people. So think of this network more like a web of resource tools and people, each with their own expertise and kind of their own knowledge base. So that's kind of what the Next Generation Extension Network kind of is all about. So I have a question for everybody who's on. If you could use the chat feature, can you think about in the last 12 months that you might have had a new delivery tool or an evaluation or a marketing method that you've implemented to reach new or existing audiences? So some new delivery tool or evaluation, some kind of new expertise that you might be able to share with us today. So if you could type that into the chat, we'll kind of watch and see what happens. Give you a few minutes to think about a delivery tool or evaluation or a marketing method that you might have used to reach a new or existing audiences where you are.
And I'll just interject in here. If you can't find the chat, go down to the lower right-hand corner. It says Collaborate Panel. Click that purple tab, and it'll expand out, and then you have the chat as one of your options there.
That's where it is.
While people are putting that in, I'll also interject that what a lot of research is telling us about educators and their willingness to adopt new tools or new strategies, that if you see a peer who was successful in adopting that new strategy or tool, you're far more likely to be willing to adopt it yourself. And so by relying on this professional learning network as kind of exemplifying or showcasing the skills that they have or the tools that they've used, we're capitalizing upon that research that indicates that that's the best way to encourage new people to use those tools.
Well, and Deb, I'll interject with when you and I were talking about, I presented for the Next Generation Extension on the cool tool called Zoom. If you haven't heard of that, it's a communication tool. And so now Deb's using it within her organization, and actually E-Extension has adopted it. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
Nebraska moved from Adobe Connect to Zoom.
Yeah. So just so so I guess it reinforces that idea that you share with somebody, and you can talk them into using something. No. Well, I'm not seeing anything. I see something in the chat, but I can't read it. How come?
Lois said that they developed the Great Lakes Clean Communities Network.
Okay.
So Lois, can you tease that out for us a little bit? How did you go about designing that, or how did you reach out to people to join that network? Did you just contact the people you knew and spring it from there? Use them to contact people they knew, or what? Maybe we don't have a very chatty group, Alan. I'll keep going here and we'll come back if we have someone
Okay,
bring
sounds good.
something up. Okay, so the way we did it in Next Generation Extension is when we were talking about bringing this forward, we actually started this initiative in 2013, and within a year, really had seen quite a bit of success in that we had a lot of people participating at every level and engaged in that Next Generation Extension. But in order to bring it forward, we decided that we needed 3 different methods for delivery. We decided that we would choose an asynchronous delivery, a synchronous delivery, and something that was a bit of a hybrid. So for our asynchronous, we decided to do a blog. That blog, if you are affiliated with Extension from anywhere, wherever your post is, you can shoot me an email and tell me what your WordPress handle or email is, and I can make you a author on that blog. On the other end, our synchronous delivery system, we decided we still wanted some face-to-face opportunities. We call those boot camps. And in the middle, we chose to do some webinars. This has changed. We used to do Adobe Breeze or Connect, and now we're using Zoom. But the webinars allowed us to do a monthly update engagement piece and refer people back to the blog, but also archive those webinars on the blog so that people that had other things that they had to do that day or whatever, but were still interested in the topic, could always tune into the blog and see that information and not miss out completely. We wanted to keep it simple and clean, so we just use those 3 delivery tools. Sometimes in professional development networks, people have a tendency to pick the topic and then decide what delivery tool they want to use, and that we found very confusing for people. They like seeing that Next Generation Extension consistently uses those 3 tools. And so when we're talking about a topic, we will choose one of those tools. Okay, so the 3 tools that we did do, I'm going to tease those out a little bit more. The blog itself is nextgenerationextension.org. So you're welcome to go out and share that. I will put that in the chat here for you too. And we have specific categories like delivery strategies, apps, social media, web-based learning, evaluation, grants and funding, scholarship and creative work, and teaching translational research. So we try to, keep topics on each of those different areas. It changes over time. Sometimes things float to the surface, but in general, this is what we're blogging about. Here's a little word cloud that I created. It's all the posts that we have on the blog. And you can see extension is probably the most frequently used topic, right? Because it's an extension professional development network. Things that float to the top always are social media, apps, web-based learning, evaluation, scholarship, and teaching. Our blog has reached places we never expected it to reach. We have participants following the blog from every state in the United States. Sometimes I'm surprised at who's interested in specific topics, but I find it interesting. Even when we're talking about policy on the blog that might be specific to Nebraska, other states sometimes are facing some of the same policies, and so it ends up reaching more people than you think it would, actually. The webinars, like I said, are done once a month. We have a tendency to go after the second Tuesday of every month at 10 o'clock Central Time. I've recently started posting those on Learn with e-extension as well, so you can follow the blog, and they'll be posted there, or you can watch for them on Learn. The topics are every bit as broad as the topics that we have being discussed on our blog. We try to have as many of them as possible created by extension educators or assistants here locally, because we know back to where we know that extension educators are likely to adopt behaviors or practices that they see exemplified by other extension educators that have had success with them. So we've had some educators from other states present, but we keep it pretty close to the topics that are relevant to our educators here in Nebraska. Then the third method, the boot camps. This is a picture of one of our boot camps, and I kind of like this picture because at one time I showed this to a group of people and they thought, well, it looked like a really disorganized day. And I will tell you that our boot camps, we have a tendency to do in a flipped methodology, a flipped classroom methodology. Here's a little model for you to look at. A flipped classroom takes Bloom's taxonomy and kind of turns it upside down. So on the left-hand side, this is traditionally how we used to do it. We used to put people in a classroom and we'd, give them, PowerPoints or whatever where they could really get at these lower level Bloom's learning levels, and then we would send them home to do the application. Well, with our boot camps, what we're doing is we will email out to them some preparatory work that they need to do so that when they travel to our face-to-face boot camp, they're really ready to get to work, to apply what they're learning about and make it happen. So I'll go back to that picture again. So what you saw here was the groups of people getting together and thinking, okay, how can we apply this to the work that we do specifically? Okay, back to you, Alan.
Right. So, so during the kind of the boot camps and some other things to get the faculty kind of engaged and be part of the next generation extension network, and part of their staff excellent plan. So they did kind of a self-assessment. They had assistance in signing up for the next generation extension blog and mailings, and then staff were also encouraged to include or expand their use of technology. So just another way for the staff to kind of get engaged and kind of build that personal learning network and share ideas with each other. And also some of the staff were designated to serve as mentors to help the others kind of get started on their journey to kind of creating a network of people who they could rely on for help with technology and other things. So we kind of wondered, how do you think you might get your professional learning network started today? So that's something you might want to think about after kind of hearing how Deb and I have talked about her great collaboration project, I would call it. And so maybe you can start thinking about a way that maybe you could start getting a personal learning network together. So Deb, you want to address that right now?
Yeah, Janice said she asked the question, can you talk a bit about the format of the boot camp, what happens during a boot camp, for example? And I would say, Janice, that really is topic dependent. We've had project-based learning boot camps where prior to the boot camp, we sent out a definition of project-based learning. We sent out some examples, some videos people could watch, and then kind of challenged them to, when they came to the boot camp, to really commit to using it in some way. And so it's really asking them to move beyond, you know, sitting in the room and just listening to how other people have done it, to adopting it and thinking how they can use that. It's not saying they have to use it, but how could they use it? And so the level of adoption goes up quite a bit if they take the theoretical ahead of time and then they come to the boot camp and they are challenged in small groups or whatever to really think through how that applies to a specific area and how they're going to get it going. And usually someone in those small groups then will actually implement it and take a couple of people along the ride with them. So we've had ones about applying for grants. We've had some, actually the most recent one was about building your own app. And so we had some parameters around what to bring and what kind of apps would be appropriate. And then we sat down and in 4 hours had an app. So it really depends upon the topic. But because they're flipped, we're not expecting people to just sit back and listen to how someone else has done it. They've received all that information ahead of time. So they've got some preparation work that they do ahead of time. Does that answer your question, Janice? Okay. So this next slide is kind of my professional learning network. It's people that I rely upon on a weekly basis, and I've got them kind of grouped based upon how around topics or around specific functions, but that network just continues to grow and grow and grow. You find pockets of really cool information, and I will tell you that because I look at professional development from this framework, when I go to conferences or whatever, I have a tendency to maybe dive a little deeper or come out of conferences with a new collaboration effort rather than just going and attending and coming back with a great idea. I will tell you the paper, though, that I pick up at a conference will sit on my desk for a long time and then it goes in the trash. I rarely go back and look at that. But I will come out of it usually with some collaboration effort. So it's kind of thinking about it a little bit differently. How can you really use networking time to really max out your opportunities for growth? Okay. Other questions?
Well, I'm just going to pop in here. This is Lois again. And are you ready to take questions from the audience right now?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if anyone has a question, they can type it into the chat box, which is located in the collaborate panel. And I guess I'll just start off with one, Deb and Alan. You know, I mentioned that we have our Great Lakes Clean Communities Network, which is similar in terms of trying to get people sharing information and networking. But one thing that we often have difficulty with is keeping it fresh and keeping people coming back to our site to partake. What do you do to keep people engaged?
Well, I think that with our blog in particular, right now I don't think it's probably as engaged because we haven't been posting as frequently as we once had. But I will say that initially when we developed it, the idea, a lot of times organizations will develop a blog, and because they want to keep the voice consistent on the blog, they'll choose to have one or two people moderate the blog and be the only people that can post. And with Next Generation Extension, we opened it up to anyone with an extension ID. It'll have it'll have your WordPress ID on there too, so we can figure out who posts stuff, and we can go in as administrators and delete those posts. But we really opened it up with anyone with an extension ID can post, because if you just have one or two people and everyone is emailing them posts, then it isn't as engaging because it feels like you're being policed rather than engaged in the process. Does that make sense, Janice?
Yeah, this was Lois who asked the question.
Or Lois, sorry.
Yeah, right. And then also with your the ones that are on site, how do you get those people to come together?
We just put out a post on our blog, and then we send an email here in Nebraska and tell them what the topic is. Have in the initial email that tells them time, place, location, all that stuff, right? We put in there the homework. And they also know that when they come to the event, the boot camp, we're not going to take time out to start at ground zero and explain everything. We expect you to have your homework done. And so we start getting to work on it. And there's something empowering in that the educators know that if they're somewhat familiar with the idea, like that app making workshop that we had, or boot camp that we had, App Maker. If they were already familiar with App Maker, they could just come and jump on a team, right? If they weren't familiar with App Maker, they had some homework to do to get ready for it, but they don't show up to those boot camps then where no one has a computer. They bring their stuff, or it's kind of wasted mileage for them. And I think, by them knowing that they're going to come out of those boot camps with something that they can actually use and it's ready to implement, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, thanks. Janice has a question. She says, has there been any changes in the tools or formats used based on feedback from the network, peer decision making, so to speak?
Well, we did change from Adobe Connect to Zoom, and that, I was familiar with Zoom from Alan, but that was decided at the administrative level, and they provided us accounts. So that did change, but, it wasn't necessarily a peer-based decision, okay? What is a peer-based decision is at the end of each one of our webinars, we have a Google form that we use to have people provide us feedback on what they learned and how they could use it. And at the end of it, we ask them to define topics that they would like to know more about. And people are pretty vocal about sharing what they need to know. And we can use that data and kind of collect, and it's kind of a little qualitative research project, but look for common tools that people are repeating and asking to know more about. And then as a team, we get together and discuss that specific tool or that specific topic and say, is this something that we can address in a boot camp, or is it something we can address in a webinar? Is it just a post, or do we really need to have a boot camp to get to the depth that they're needing? So, just doing a needs assessment each time. Did that answer your question, Janice?
She said yes. I'm sure you see that also.
Okay.
How does your group interact with e-extension?
Well, different ones on the group have different roles with e-extension. You know, on my learning network there, you can see Larry Lipke over in the lower left-hand corner, right? And I taught this course on Moodle, which is the platform that e-extension uses for online courses. And I've laughed with Larry about this quite a bit, but Larry and I were stumped on writing some coding in that course that would pull some data that we needed. And I put it out on a Moodle blog, right? And asked if anyone knew how to write the coding because we didn't have any specific people here at the university that were doing SQL programming. And this guy from Argentina wrote my code in 2 hours, and I'd spent weeks trying to find someone in person that could do this code for me. And so I think it's thinking about things from a different perspective that, you know, I don't have to ask Alice Henneman every one of my blogging questions. Sometimes I can put it out there into the world and trust that it will come back with something good. But I took that code that I got from Argentina and I sent it to Larry, and I'm like, Larry, does this look nefarious or something to you? Is everything look okay with this? Because I don't know this person. And he laughed and laughed about it, and he said, it looks great. And so we implemented it, and it worked great. So, you know, just thinking a little bit differently, or a little bit out of the box about what you're using for professional development. I know I told Alan this story, but for years I used Twitter for professional development. If I had a big question, right, and I had a tech problems and I'm someplace, you know, there's not a tech person there with me. I am the tech person, but if I had a big tech question, I could put it out on Twitter, and someone in my network would answer my question for me. So it's thinking about questions or professional development in a little bit different way, and maybe more the world is flat way. Does that make sense?
Yes, that was a great answer. Other people on the line, does anybody else have any questions? Please type it into the chat box. Well, I guess I don't want to be the only one asking questions, but since I have the open mic, I'll ask one more. Alan, you had mentioned, you said we're developing strategies to assess the impact of our extension work. That's always an issue that we're faced with, to assess what our impacts are. Can you share some of these strategies that you have? If there's anything new and different or on the horizon?
I can throw one out there for you, Alan.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay,
Deb.
so we have this app that we wrote this grant a while back, and it's called Happy Orchard. And within the grant, we were developing educational resources to teach children and families about the importance of pollinators in food production. Okay, so we created this gaming app, and it didn't take us very long to really sit down and think, well, how are we going to measure the impact of this app, right? And we could look at downloads, but downloads don't really tell the whole story. Just like web clicks don't really tell the whole story. And anyway, as we were developing more and more products, for our Happy Orchard line, we purchased some wildflower seeds because we came up with the idea that we could distribute these wildflower seeds as part of our Happy Orchard presentations. And each seed packet we knew would cover 10 square feet of ground. But we could put on the seed packet that if people tweeted a picture of their wildflowers they'd planted, then we can actually measure how many new acres of wildflower, aka pollinator habitats, we have developed as a result of our grant. So it's thinking through, you know, what are you really trying to change? Well, we're trying to change in that people understand that pollinators are important for food production and that each one of us can take a positive role in changing the turn or changing the tide with pollinator resources and promoting pollinators. And so putting together new acres of wildflower seeds, that helps us get towards that goal. Does that make sense, Lois?
Yeah, that's great. That's really good.
So I think it's not always, using the obvious, we have to put out an assessment, paper pencil assessment, but really thinking through, what is the, what is the economic impact of what you're doing? What is the visual impact of what you're doing? Because those are two things that really speak to our stakeholders. We had a clinician from Mississippi, and I wish I could remember his name off the top of my head, but he had wrote a wonderful article for the Journal of Extension, and I thought it was so cool. So I cold called him and asked him if he'd do a presentation for Next Gen Extension and explain his formula for determining the green impact of doing curriculum online versus face-to-face. And anyway, I used his formula and have reworked it so that it aligns with the work that I do in STEM and ag literacy, and I use that formula a lot. But it allows me to show the economic impact of the work that I do.
So I'm not seeing any questions right now. Is Alan or Deb, is there anything else you want to share with us about the next generation extension? And you've done an excellent job with what you've said already.
I just encourage everyone to go check it out, at the link that Deb sent.
Yeah, check it out. Shoot Alan and I an email and let us know if there's some tool that you use that you just are just crazy over because it works so well. Let us know, because you might be the next clinician for Next Gen Extension, because sharing those, what worked, what didn't. We also have shared some what didn't work examples as well, but people are always more excited over a positive result than a negative. I can tell you that we have a couple of sessions coming up here in November. Kathleen Lodel, who is the Associate Dean for Extension here in Nebraska, will be doing a presentation on kind of tiptoeing between getting financial donations for programming and not appearing to endorse specific businesses, and how to appropriately do that dance. And then in December, we're going to try a webinar called Extension Hacks. And each presenter will be given no more than 5 minutes for that. And we're asking each presenter to present their best life hack for our life here in Extension. So if you have a life hack for Extension educators, shoot me an email with that life hack and share it with our Extension staff in December. Be a little mini Christmas present.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you both, Deb and Alan, for this presentation. This session, as well as past webinars, are archived on the North Central Region Water Network's website. As you can see, the URL's there, northcentralwater.org or learnextension.org. The webinar series occurs on the second Wednesday of the month at 2 p.m. Central and 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And please let other people, your colleagues, know about this presentation, because there weren't a lot of people on the presentation, but it was a great presentation. I'd like other people to get a chance to hear it. So make sure they know about where it's being archived so they'll get a chance to see it as well. So thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next month on Wednesday, November the 8th for our next presentation.